Hello there, this is your Sir Paul. Good day. Today we learn more about projectiles. So tara, let's learn. So today for projectiles, we now go to case 1. Previously, you have learned about the basic concepts of a projectile in our previous video. So ngayon, let's break down further and analyze case 1, the motion of a projectile that is thrown horizontally. Okay, so let's start now breaking down. Now, pagpalagay natin, meron tayong isang object that is thrown horizontally with respect to a horizontal surface. Okay, let's start to visualize. Okay, tingnan natin. Ayan, so this is the object. It is now thrown horizontally. And now take note, there is an initial velocity here now, V naught, of the object. Okay, so what will happen next? Now, I want you to properly observe this animation. So now, as you can see, ayan, nakikita nyo na ang parabolic motion ng object natin thrown horizontally. Now, at this part, this animation now shows you the vertical and the horizontal motions of the animation of the object a while back as represented dito sa ating mga green na circles. Okay, so now in this slide, you can now see the horizontal and vertical components broken down. Okay, so ayan, nakikita niyo sa grid, you connect the ones in the x direction and the y direction. Ayan, makikita niyo na yung parabolic shape at motion ng ating projectile in case 1. Let's continue. Okay, so at this point, let's analyze further. Katulad ng ginawa natin sa previous video on the concept of projectile, we also have further breakdown questions here. Okay, so let's read. Sabi dito, what can be said of the horizontal component of the velocity of an object thrown horizontally? Next, what can be said of the vertical component of the velocity of an object thrown horizontally? How does this component look like? So expect, sabi natin, just like objects in motion, as you have understood sa mga previous topics natin, when an object, of course, is moving in a certain direction, okay, and traveling a certain distance, expect that it has velocity. To further understand projectile, okay, we break down now. We try to take a look at what happens to the velocity of the object. Since ang projectile natin ay composed ng horizontal and vertical motions, okay? So yun ang titignan natin ngayon, okay? What is happening with the horizontal velocity and the vertical velocity as well in projectile motion case 1? Okay, so now here are the answers to the questions in the previous slides. Doon muna tayo sa first question, okay? Let's focus on the horizontal motion or the horizontal component of projectile case 1. We have an example here. Sabi dito, a ball rolled off the edge of a table. Okay, now I'll be reading this and then sa next slide, you'll let us visualize more. So it says here, in the horizontal component, okay, of the ball travels the same distance. Take note, the same distance at equal time intervals. And the horizontal component of the velocity of a projectile in case 1 is constant. Okay, all throughout parehas ang kanyang velocity in the horizontal direction. Why? Because gravity only acts downward. Sabi nga natin, there is independence between the horizontal and the vertical motion of projectiles. Okay, now let's use this picture that we have here in this slide to visualize properly kung ano ibig sabihin ng answer kanina. So, pansin nyo dito sa picture natin na ito, you are given already the breakdown of the vertical in the horizontal components, let me see, ayan, o yung mga V2 sub V2x here and the V2y here. Yan. The x, of course, is the horizontal component and the y's now are the vertical component. So, binibigay na sa inyo dito visually yung dalawang klase ng components of the velocity of a projectile in case 1. Now, there is a question here. Let's read. Sabi niya, what do you notice about the length of the arrows representing the horizontal component or the x component? So, pansinin ninyo, may pagbabago ba? Ayan. Are there changes? Let's show the arrows. Ayan. Do you notice some changes in the length of the the horizontal components or the horizontal arrows here? Kung mapapansin nyo, wala. Okay, so therefore, what happens? Ayan, here is the answer. Okay, now there is same distance traveled at equal time intervals. Ibig sabihin, after, say, for example, every 2 seconds, they travel the same distance as you can see here in the image. Okay, and in terms of velocity, since hindi nagbabago yung length ng arrow nito, that means that the velocity is constant. Bakit? Ayun, hindi nga nagbabago yung length. Pag sinabi nating length, that represents now the magnitude or kung gaano kalaki in numerical value yung velocity ng isang object that is in motion. So, here is now one consequence of the independence ng horizontal at ng vertical motion ng isang projectile. Okay, ngayon, for the second question a while back, here is now the answer. It says here, for the vertical component, the vertical distances traveled, take note, vertical distances traveled are the same as an object in free fall. So what happens? Okay, sa vertical component naman sa object in case 1 projectile, vertical position becomes farther apart with each time interval. Okay, mas lumalayo yung distansya na natatravel vertically. Okay, if you take a look at it, we will see afterwards again in the next slide. Let's visualize. And now the vertical component of the velocity increases. Why? Because of the influence of the downward pull of the force of gravity. Okay? Okay, now para ma-visualize yung answer kanina, we now have an image here. The image shows a cannonball shot over a cliff with respect to the horizontal surface there doon sa cliff natin. Okay, pansin niyo yung movement ng cannonball natin. And also given are the breakdown again of the x, the horizontal, and the y components ng velocity ng cannonball natin. Okay, as it moves from its initial launching point to its destination. Okay? So, nakikita nyo ulit yung mga arrows, the v sub x's here and the v sub y's. Now, let's answer the question here. Anong nanonotice ninyo about the length of the arrows now representing the vertical component of the velocity? So, particularly yung mga v sub y, ano ang nanonotice natin? Okay? Let's point again with the arrows. Anong napapansin natin? So, if you try to take a look, there is now an increase in the length, okay, doon sa vertical components natin or our v sub y's as we go down from second to second sa vertical motion natin, okay, the length of the arrow increases. Okay, when the length of the arrow increases, that means now that there is increase in velocity. So, anong nangyayari pag ganyan? Okay? So, sabi dito, now the vertical position becomes farther with each time interval. So, now talking about distance, if you now to try to take a look at the vertical aspect of a projectile, ang distansya as we go from second to second, ayan o, there is now increase in distance. The distance becomes now farther as we move from second to second. At ano nangyayari sa velocity? As represented by the arrows here in our image, nagkakaroon ng increase in velocity. So as you can see, there is also an increase in the numbers here. Ayan o, given yung mga numerical values ng v sub y natin. for every second na mapapansin ninyo, there is an increase by 10 meters per second. Notice also that there is a negative sign here. Again, the negative sign here will most likely, of course, represent the downward direction of the velocity of an object, because as we have said, a projectile is a combination of horizontal motion and free fall motion as well. So, yan ang mga ilan sa effects ulit ng independence ng horizontal at ng vertical motion sa isang projectile. Okay, so ngayon, let's sum things up for projectile case 1. Tandaan, in projectiles, motion is always accelerated. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, acceleration ng projectile is constant and always in the downward direction. Okay, bakit? Sabi nga natin, it's a combination of free fall motion and uniform horizontal motion. So, value of acceleration of projectiles will be acceleration due to gravity, negative 9.8 meters per second squared. Okay? Next, take note in terms of velocity. In the horizontal, velocity is always constant. Okay? For the horizontal aspect or the motion. Next, for the vertical aspect, vertical component or vertical velocity is now increasing or now increases per time interval. Okay? Next, let's also take note, in terms of distance naman, horizontally, the horizontal aspect, per second or per time interval, they travel the same distance. But kung titingnan natin ang vertical motion naman ng isang projectile, okay, nag-i-increase ang distance niya per time interval because they are independent of each other. But of course, even though they are independent, they always use the same travel time. Okay, so yun ang mga points that we take from understanding projectile motion case 1. I hope you have learned a lot in this video lesson. This has been your Sir Paul. Thank you for listening. Lagi pong tandaan na pangalagaan ang ating kalusugan, and I will see you in our next topic.